Welcome back. Change in direction. The 2022 midterms wrapped up over 3 weeks ago, but the changes in leadership and the tides it has brought are beginning to crash onto D.C., with a change in the House Democratic caucus's entire leadership slate and House GOP leaders contending with a narrower than expected majority. We'll talk about what's been going on, who these top leaders are, and what it means for 2024. And I'll sit down with Illinois State Rep Tom Morrison to talk politics, the headlines, and more. Today, December 2nd, 2022. From Ishan Media, this is the Ishan S. Show, a podcast about the interesting and ever-changing world of American politics, with me, your host, Ishan. Welcome back, friends, to the Ishan S. Show. I'm so glad to be back. We have a very packed episode planned, and that interview with Representative Tom Morrison, which I'm so excited to share with you all, will be on soon. Now, I'm returning from a 2-week hiatus. Now, first week I wasn't feeling too great, and last week I decided to take Thanksgiving off. But rest assured, I do intend on staying with you guys throughout most of the remainder of 2022. Look out for some news on, a political year in review special. There's a lot being planned for this show in terms of what we have going forward. And of course, as that continues, there are going to be more shakeups in the schedule. So we'll just have to see how often these episodes come out. But just stay tuned every Friday because I'm sure we'll be out every week. Anyway, let's get right into today's episode topic. Now, I want to start today's episode probably with a big story that we're still discussing right now. And I know people are going to tell me, Ishan, there are a billion stories that you could be talking about. But I think a lot of it divulges down to just one question, or one topic, rather. And that's the one I'm about to talk about right now. And it's not a topic that I was able to really cover as much in depth 2 weeks ago, and that's the results of the 2022 midterms. Now, I think the last time we talked, neither the House nor the Senate were called for either party. And there were quite a few outstanding races at all levels that were yet to be called. So if you weren't following the Ishan S. Show's extensive coverage, then let me tell you what happened. So basically, in simple terms, Democrats won the Senate and Republicans won the House. Pretty straightforward. That's what I expected to happen, and that's what I told you to expect. So, score, we got it right. But the big headline out of the midterms was actually that the fact that we didn't see a red wave. And that's something that we also anticipated here on the show and everywhere else. Even I predicted pretty confidently, I feel like, that it was going to be a bloodbath for Democrats. But, things turned around, and it did not end up being the awful night that Democrats were really worried about and Republicans were excited for. And if you want to find out just more about that flop, if you will, you can listen to the last episode, which came out a few weeks ago, where I did go more in depth into expectations for these midterms this year. Now, don't get me wrong. Democrats are still in the minority. They went wrong somewhere. They still have lost the speakership, and they've lost all their power on committees. Republicans can now do what they've been saying they're going to do for 2 years, which is investigations, which is going to be, stalling the Biden agenda, which is exactly what any opposition party wants to do. So they have a lot. They have essentially on paper lost their power. But it's only by 10 seats. Now, you've got to realize, unlike other countries, our politicians here in the United States tend to be a little more independent, which means that the parliamentary grasp that you see in other countries, with political parties very much dictating every possible move of their politicians, is not very common here. Although that might be changing, but that's besides the point. But when you think about it, just owing to how much we cover on this show about the instability in party politics, running a 10-seat majority, that's very slim, and it's the furthest from convenient. So that brings me into one of our stories of this week, which is about the House GOP leadership. Kevin McCarthy, name you heard on this show, I'm sure. If not, he is a congressman from California who is serving as the House Republican leader. He replaced Paul Ryan, for my friends that want to look that far back. Now, if he were under some complementary circumstances, I would actually be calling him Speaker Designate McCarthy. Now, the reason I'm not is because even though Republicans are confirmed to have control of the House, who becomes Speaker right now is a bit of an iffy question. And that's because of the baby-sized majority that McCarthy's working with. Whereas the Democratic caucus has been shifting towards being more homogenous and who they pick as their leaders, the House GOP is slightly more divided and a little more factioned. That poses a problem for somebody like Kevin McCarthy because he needs to unite a party. And with such a small majority, he needs basically every Republican vote to become Speaker because Democrats are not going to be voting for him, and he basically has to rely on the 218 people at least to vote for him. Now, quick procedural rule that I should explain. In our modern political day, speakers of the House, who are second in line for the presidency after the vice president, are the elected leaders of their party conferences generally in the House. And so in speaker elections, these party leaders, minority leader is something you hear, that's generally the person who is their leader, and the party in power obviously has the speaker. But anyway, the leaders of these parties in the House, they decide a lot of things. They decide committee assignments, they decide funding, etc. They're important. Anyway, these leaders, nominees, if you will, from each party run against each other to become speaker. And that's for all 435 representatives to vote in. Whereas when you're selecting a leader, it's an intra-party conference vote. So only members of your party will. And then after those people vote, then everybody votes. And generally, if your party's picked a nominee, obviously you're going to vote for him. But back to McCarthy, though, the math isn't looking really good for him. Now, McCarthy pretty comfortably won the nomination contest in a vote of 188 to, I think, 31 or something votes. Yay, I'm the nominee, he says. But wait, he continues, 31 people didn't vote for me. Those 31 or so people actually voted for Representative Andy Biggs, a prominent Tea Party movement, now MAGA movement, Republican, who is also the chair of the right-wing Freedom Caucus in the House, which has a huge sway in the Republican Party. And the Freedom Caucus is a group of representatives who I've talked about before on the show, but they're basically a group of right-wing representatives. They were born out of the Tea Party movement. That's a little more research that you can do, but just to say that they have a huge segment of the Republican House Republican Party. And so whatever they say, they have a lot of influence. But anyway, Biggs and his supporters said that they didn't like McCarthy's leadership, and they blamed him. And actually, we saw something similar in the Senate, but anyway, they blamed McCarthy for a disappointing midterms, and among other things. Now, many have dismissed this challenge from Representative Biggs of Arizona as a failed coup against leader McCarthy, and sure, it could be. But in such a tight environment where he can afford to lose at most, I think, 4 or 5 votes, if I'm doing my math right, 31 is a nightmare for him. There are reports that many of these Republicans will not vote for McCarthy next year in January to be Speaker. Democrats don't have 218 votes, so their leader won't win. McCarthy can't say with confidence that he has a confirmed slate of voters to vote for him, and neither do Biggs and the other Republican rebels. So what happens? Well, we won't have a speaker. It's funny to think, but we literally just won't have a speaker if we can't vote for a guy with 218 votes. Someone or anyone. You just need to win the votes. It doesn't even have to be your party's in power. That's not even a rule. That's just how things work. But if we don't even have a speaker, then that's going to be very dysfunctional for our House of Representatives. And it'll just go to show how divided we are. But I don't think we really need to worry too much about that, about the idea of us not even having a leader in the House. What I think this group is trying to do is they're trying to weaponize their extensive grasp and influence over the House GOP rules and procedure to give themselves a little more influence in the conference. And it's because they claim that they are not represented well enough in party leadership, and they'd like more say in what goes on. They'd like to be more involved. So I don't think they'll actually hijack the speaker election process like this, but it's obviously like it's never happened before. We just need to look back 100 years. What's more likely is that McCarthy might make some concessions to get their votes, and then he'll be speaker. That's what has happened to Nancy Pelosi. It happened to John Boehner before her, although he did resign when he lost his party's confidence later, but that was a different subject. And it's happened to countless other speakers. So the threats, that is not that they haven't been voted for, it's just the threats. We'll be keeping a close tab on those vote counts for McCarthy because those could be changing a lot, or maybe they might just stay stagnant and McCarthy may not go in on January 3rd knowing whether or not he'll have a job. But then let's look to the Democrats. Now, big news, Nancy Pelosi is not going to run to be Democratic leader again. Whoa. She's giving up her spot in leadership that she's held for nearly 20 years. She did this to make room for a new generation, is what she said. This was seismic because over the last 20 years, American politics has changed a lot, and I mean a lot. And people like Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell, whatever your opinions may be about them, they have been constants in all of that. I mean, their tenure as their leaders, I think actually might have been longer than my entire lifetime. That's basically how long she's been there. I think Mitch McConnell, maybe his tenure and my age are the same, but Nancy Pelosi's been there 4 years longer than me. They've always been familiar faces at the table, and for people like myself, well, they've just been the only face. But I guess not anymore. Pelosi, who is going to be leaving a sizable legacy, will stay in the House. She will be a representative for San Francisco, as she has been. But she will not be speaker anymore, and she will not be minority leader in the new Congress. In addition to her, her top lieutenant, Steny Hoyer of Maryland, once seen as her logical replacement, also then announced, I think within a matter of minutes, that he wouldn't run for his number 2 spot, which cleared the way for the top 2 jobs to go to a new face. Representative Hakeem Jeffries of New York, current Democratic Party, current Democratic Party chair in the House, who was seen as the heir apparent to Nancy Pelosi in the last few years, swiftly took her job as leader in a unanimous vote. Think about that for 1 second. That's 200 plus people. Not one person challenged you. Not a single person voted no. That's impressive. And he basically won a unanimous vote. And unlike previous years, these types of contests get nasty. But unlike previous years, his top 2 deputies, that's Catherine Clark of Massachusetts and Pete Aguilar of California, were elected to the number 2 and number 3 jobs in the party, respectively. So they kind of cleaned house, Democrats said, that is. And, I mean, they didn't clean house completely. Representative Jim Clyburn, important pivotal guy for Joe Biden's presidential election, that representative's endorsement of Joe Biden in South Carolina basically saved his campaign. So Jim Clyburn's a very important guy. He actually decided to stay in office. He did not want to leave. So Democrats didn't clear house, but they sweeped out a lot. And Jeffries' election now actually makes him the first African-American member of Congress to lead either party in the House or the Senate. And he has said in private and public that he hopes to take advantage of McCarthy's slim majority to help Democrats win back the majority in 2024. when he would obviously then become Speaker. That doesn't come without challenges, though, because while Democrats are homogenous in who they are selecting as their leaders, they can be hard to manage from a leadership standpoint. And I say that because everyone is everywhere in the Democratic Party. In the Republican Party, it's a little more factional, so you just have to win the little segments of the party. With Democrats, winning votes to become a leader is not that hard, but being a leader yourself, actually having to get votes, that's tough. So Jeffries' biggest challenge alongside, in addition with his team, he'll be sharing the burden. Their job, their new task is going to be to hold his party in line and push for the unity that he desperately would need to win a majority in 2024. And I don't think Democrats have an issue of unity. And actually, for that matter, Republicans don't have that issue either. I think the parties within themselves are pretty unified. But I think challenges for both parties, and Jeffries and McCarthy will be dealing with this a lot, it's going to be holding everybody in line. And it's going to be holding everybody in line, which, because we are a little more independent-minded in Congress, people can go wherever. Now, that's going to be a little easier for Jeffries, just because his party's in the minority, so nothing matters too much. It's not like President Biden's agenda is now his biggest burden. He's in the minority. He can't do much. So he has a little more leeway, but McCarthy's probably going to struggle with this. So the House has a new face leading it. Kevin McCarthy will be the first speaker. He will not be the first speaker. It will be his first time being speaker, and maybe only because a segment of his caucus intends on taking the speakership election hostage, he might have to make some concessions. Also, not very common, by the way. In general, you don't see that happen. Nancy Pelosi, for the first time in 20 years, will not be the important Democrat in the room. Hakeem Jeffries will now be that person. There's a tide in politics, and I think we push for and as we're pushing for newer, younger leaders, we're definitely going to see more of this. Might we see it in presidential politics? Well, maybe. I don't see why not. Politics outlives us all. And through it all, what survives are ideas, the proposals, and the successes that build legacies. Whether or not we'll see a huge change in political waters is yet to be seen. But I'm sure there's a lot of potential, because there's a lot of potential people out there with a lot of promise in both parties that I'm going to be keeping a close eye on. All right, that was a look at some House of Representatives intra-party politics. When we come back from the break, I will be joined by Illinois State Representative Tom Morrison to talk about the 2022 midterms, his career, and other topics. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this short break. All right, so we're back from the break. Now, the 2022 midterms are over, but even then, knowing the candidates and elected officials up and down the ballot is so important to being an informed citizen. It's something I've said repeatedly on this show. That ranges everywhere from the president to members of your local school board. Now, our next guest is actually our first office holder to be featured on the Ishan S Show, which is quite exciting. He's represented the 54th District of Illinois since 2011, and he's been a leader in the Illinois Republican Party. Here to talk with us about his career and more, we are joined by Representative Tom Morrison. Representative Morrison, thank you so much for joining us here today.
You're welcome, Ishan. Glad to be on.
Now, before we do get started, as you know, a lot of my listener base is actually from your district right now. But even for those who don't know you, why don't you take a few moments to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So Tom Morrison, state representative for the 54th District. And I have a background as a small business owner. I also was a fifth grade teacher for 6 years. And I was in both print and radio and television journalism for a few years before that too. So I've done a lot. I had, they say jack of all trades, but it's helped me in my role here as a state legislator, because we vote on so many issues from A to Z, and having such a varied background has really helped me, because when I had my small business, I had to deal with federal and state and local issues. As a teacher, obviously that is very much involved with state government and local government policy. As a parent, I'm concerned about these things. And just as a resident of our area, I care about what happens to Palatine, Illinois, and surrounding communities. So it's been a really interesting time. 12 years is how I've served. I've served on a number of different committees. Some are more exciting than others, but it's been a really neat ride.
Excellent. Quite the decorated career. I did not know about a lot of that, but you have a lot of credentials. But I want to get right into the politics of things. So this past November, we had the 2022 midterms, and we covered that extensively on this show. It was a big part of everything we've done since we started the show. Now, what we saw in this November, what we saw a few weeks ago was basically Democrats did a lot better than what was anticipated. I mean, as you know, we were being told of a red wave. We were told of all sorts of things happening. We were going to see a bloodbath for Democrats. But in reality, what we saw at the federal level was very narrow, and we saw Democrats actually expand on their supermajority here in Illinois. So I wanted to get your thoughts and reaction to what happened and what you think might have gone wrong for your party.
Well, I don't think you should discount the effect of money in politics. It's a annual issue, or every election cycle, the topic comes up. All the money spent in politics, and so at the top of the ticket, you had the governor's race, and we shouldn't forget. So Governor Pritzker is the wealthiest elected official in America today.
True. That
And
is right.
so, with his run in 2018 and then his run for reelection in 2022, cumulatively, he has spent $1/3 billion to get elected. Now that's his own money. He's free to spend that money however he wants. But those are jaw-dropping amounts of money. And so it doesn't just benefit him as a candidate for governor, but every other race down ballot is going to benefit from that kind of spending. And so what sort of things can you buy with $1/3 billion? You're buying a very, very robust polling data. So district by district, you can know what messages are going to really resonate with the voters that live in that district. You can make sure that voters who are registered to vote but may sit on the sidelines quite a bit, you're making sure that those people are getting a ballot and that they're filling it out and that they're turning it in. There's something called Chase, so vote by mail Chase. That campaign is paying people to make sure that those voters are turning in their ballots. And that's going to benefit the top of the ticket and, like I said, everybody down.
So would you mainly attribute the losses that we saw for your party just on the money, or do you think there were any shortcomings on your party's side as well?
Oh, I'm just saying that the money had a big factor there because there were a lot of very good candidates in districts that were winnable where the spending disparity was 5-1, 8-1, 10-1, 12-1. And it is extremely difficult to get your message out about yourself as a candidate or to talk about what your opponent stands for with those sort of spending disparities. So it is huge.
Got it. Now, so let's bring things a little local now. So to the Palatine area, you and I are both from the Palatine area, and I want to talk about the 51st district. As you know, we redrew districts here in the Palatine area, and that pitted incumbent Representative Chris Boss against newcomer Nabila Syed. And in addition to Nabila Syed is one of the new seats that have been added to the Democrats as majority. She beat Representative Boss a couple of weeks ago, and in a Daily Herald interview, you attributed in part at least, Chris Boss's loss to his lack of name recognition in the area. Now, I wanted to know if there was, like with the federal elections, is there anything else you think Representative Boss may have been able to do, or maybe anything else that might have altered this race had things had gone another way?
Well, I give credit to Nabila Syed. She worked very hard So talking to voters, which is something that I did over the 12 years, I every year would talk to thousands and thousands of my constituents because I wanted to know genuinely what they cared about so that when I'm down here in Springfield and I'm in the House chamber right now, that when I was voting, I was accurately reflecting where my district stood on a variety of issues. And the best way to do that is not with a poll, it's with actually talking to those residents face to face or by
And you
phone or by email.
and you said that Representative Voss did not do that
No,
as much.
what I'm saying is I give credit to Ms. Syed for being really active and doing a lot of door knocking and getting to meet voters because that personal touch really goes a long way. And as a FREMD graduate, I'm sure that she is well known. As you're I'm in the House chamber, you're at FREMD. I'm sure that she is well known, well liked in the FREMD community, and I'm sure that helped her. If a voter isn't really paying attention to a state race all that much, but somebody shows up with a local connection like Friend High School, that's going to be a very appealing message. Whereas even though Representative Boss was an incumbent, because of the gerrymandering, all these districts were really radically shaken up. So the district that I represented for 10 of those 12 years primarily was the Palatine Township area. So I got to be really, really well known in Palatine Township. Well, with the remap, those districts were just obliterated. And so the district that Representative Boss has, or had, I should say, was just a portion of, about half of it, I would say, was the Palatine area, and then the rest of it went up in Lake County. And so, like I said, the voters are not paying attention as much as I think they should to the local and state races, because that has a far bigger impact on our day-to-day lives than issues or candidates at the federal level.
So what would you say candidates on both sides can do to get their messages out, to get voters excited? Maybe something we saw in this race, but what else could future candidates do?
Well, as I said, I'm a big advocate for the candidates themselves getting out and getting face to face in front of voters and having voters ask the hard questions on a variety of issues. And hopefully those candidates answer honestly. I tried to do that, as I was talking to a voter. If a voter and I disagreed on some topic, we still went away with the voter knowing where I stood rather than, some,
Ambiguity.
what's that?
Rather than the ambiguity that you do see sometimes in politics.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So but it's hard. I mean, life is busy. People are busy. Voters are busy, especially if they're parents with kids' school and activities and work obligations. It's hard to find the time to learn who's running for all these different races and what the relevant topics are with all these different races. I mean, you could see, for example, some of the issues that you saw Democrats run on really were not that relevant to Illinois, but they polled well and they were really big federal issues, and so they ran on those issues, and it could hurt a Republican candidate potentially. I'll take, for example, Social Security. This comes up almost every single election cycle. It's super frustrating. So Social Security, it's a federal issue. It's a federally run program. State lawmakers have nothing to do with it. And yet, sometimes you'll see attack ads against, say, a Republican candidate saying, so-and-so Republican candidate wants to get rid of your Social Security. Well, that's not even possible. It's just, but it's a hot button issue, and if you're a voter that relies on those Social Security checks every month, then that might be a scary thing. Oh my gosh, I don't want to vote for somebody who's going to get rid of my Social Security, even though that person's running for an Illinois position and can not do anything about it, regardless of what their position is on Social Security.
I see. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about the area. So you did not run for re-election. Your 12 years are going to be coming to a close next month. Well, not next month, but in January. Now, many people, even in my discussions with people in local politics, have said that if you were to have run, you might have been a more formidable opponent for Ms. Syed. So I want you to talk about your decision not to run for re-election. Walk us through all the things that you considered when you decided not to run. And do you think you might have cost the Illinois Republican Party a seat in the House?
Well, I had a lot of factors that weighed on my decision. We don't have enough time in this interview to go through all of them because I'm not kidding. I mean, there were probably a dozen to 15 factors that I was weighing. The map was one of them, but only one. The number one issue I came to is, do I really want to sign up for 2 more years and potentially be away from my family for all the travel and time that we need to spend down here in Springfield? So here we are, we're on a weekday night. Instead of spending dinner with my family and helping my kids with their homework, I'm here in Springfield. And on a weekend, instead of maybe going with my kids to the park, I would need to be out knocking on doors like I just described a few minutes ago, which is really important to winning re-election. And so I just decided 12 years was enough. I really am looking forward to spending more time with my wife and kids. And that was the number one reason I decided not to run for re-election. But there were other things too. But by far, that was the number one reason.
I see. And those are very important factors, I mean, about your family. And it can be quite strenuating. And I talk to people all the time that tell me that it is. So, of course, that is obvious.
I've enjoyed doing it. I mean, these last 12 years, it's been hard, but it's been good. It's been something that has been a real honor. I'm so grateful for the support that I got from the Palatine area, Inverness, Rolling Meadows, Hoffman Estates. I mean, it's a real honor to be here. I mean, there's so much history in this building. And one thing that I say to students is, number one, study hard, take your schooling very seriously because you never know where it's going to take you eventually. I didn't imagine that I would be here serving like I was. I always thought that you had to be a lawyer to be a lawmaker. And
that's a common misconception for my audience. Let yourself be evidence that it's not necessary.
No, you want people who have broad experience, people who are community minded, who have a vision for what the future should be so that you can craft policy to help get there or to solve real problems. These are all valid and good reasons to run for office. And so it's been a delight to have this opportunity. So, but I'm not going to miss all the time away from home.
Understandably. Now, I'm sure you probably get this a lot, and I'm sure you've been hearing it a lot, but what is next for Tom Morrison? What are your future plans? Of course, you're going to take these next few years, months, weeks, I don't know, to spend with your family. But I want to look long term. What do you think what do you think the future has in store for you? Are we looking at other elected offices? Are we looking at maybe other community involvement? Is this the last that we're hearing from Tom Morrison? I'm sure not.
I probably will keep my foot in the door with politics. I mentioned my teaching background. I enjoy teaching others and mentoring others. And so I probably will continue to consult with people who are thinking about running for office or are actually running for office. I wouldn't rule out running for office again myself in the future after my children are a little bit older and maybe out of the house. So, what's that?
Is there anything you're thinking of right now?
Oh no, it has not crossed my mind. But again, I'm 47 years old, and we have a president who's 80 years old. So there's plenty of opportunities to run and serve in other offices if opportunities present. But I really don't have my eyes on anything else. I just really wanted to. I'll back up to the question you asked. Could I have run? I mean, it is just so time consuming as a candidate. If you want to be successful, you really have to put in the time and it's very taxing. And so, I want to do something that will probably have more regular hours, uh, but I'll still be involved with our community. I we really live in a special community, and it's special because so many people volunteer so much of their time in order to make it so. You cannot just expect government to just do everything. You have to have really solid non-for-profit organizations, volunteers who help make our community what it is. So I'm going to keep doing that too.
All right, Representative. I know that we're running short on time now, so before I do let you go, do you have any parting thoughts, any advice to maybe a future candidate that may be listening right now, or anything else that you just want to share with my audience before we do have to go?
Yeah, I just am grateful for the years that the 54th District sent me down to represent them in Springfield. I have, both in my office here in Springfield and one in Palatine, a picture of the University of Michigan football stadium. Now, why do I have that picture? I don't really care about Michigan, but there are almost as many uh, residents in our district as there are seats in that stadium.
Well, nice.
So when I come down here to Springfield, when I'm sitting at my desk among 118 other representatives covering Illinois from north to south, east to west, 12,800,000 residents, give or take a few. We are supposed to be representing those 107,000 residents in our House district. And so when we speak, when we vote, the way we conduct ourselves in public and private, it's really important that we are representing our district to the greatest ability we can, with integrity, with character, as I said, with compassion, with a mind for the future and where we ought to go, because these decisions affect people at a very, very deep level. When you're talking about one policy or another, which might help a business, which could be a family-run business with employees who, need that salary, need those health insurance benefits, or is providing a valuable good or service um, in society, that policy might lift up that business, or it might just absolutely crush it. And the lives that are affected are very grave. Health policy, criminal law, civil law, environmental policy, energy policy. These are the sort of things that people don't necessarily think about on a day-to-day basis, but we're debating and voting on those issues right here in the room behind me. And people need to be engaged. A quote that I often cite is Benjamin Franklin. I'm not 100% sure that he said this, but as the story goes, after the Constitution was ratified, Benjamin Franklin walked out of Independence Hall, and a woman in Philadelphia asked him, "So, Mr. Franklin, are we going back to a monarchy? Do we have a republic?" And he said, "Madam, we gave you a republic if you can keep it."
Right.
Meaning, if you want to be self-governed, that means the responsibility is on you and on us as citizens to be well-informed, well-engaged, and able to govern ourselves. And obviously, in a republic versus a democracy, you might, pure democracy, you're voting on every single issue. Citizens are voting on every single issue and just majority rules. And that's not how our system is set up. We have a constitution, we have representative government, but people, the citizens who are voting, need to be informed on these issues. So when that candidate knocks on your door, you know what relevant questions to ask that person.
Yeah.
And I'm sad to say, occasionally someone will ask me when I knock on their door, "Oh, so how often do you go to Washington, D.C.?" And I'll have to say, "No, I'm a state lawmaker. That means I go to Springfield. I'm voting on state laws." And so, that I don't get that question all the time, but it would come up occasionally, and it just demonstrates that people they don't necessarily know how things work, or they think that just the governor or the president can just make law. No, that's not how it works. A law, to be created or changed, has to be introduced in either the House or the Senate or both, and then debated, and then passed, and then it switches chambers, and then it has to be debated and passed, and then it goes to the governor's desk or the president's desk, and then the executive there can sign it or veto it. And so this is a whole process that is good and healthy, because you don't want laws made by just one person.
Right.
You don't
Right.
want laws that are just created or changed willy-nilly without thoughtful deliberation, without input from citizens saying, yeah, this is good, and there is broad public support for this or that. That it's messy, but it's the best system, I think, that's out there. And I'm just grateful that we live in this country, warts and all, but we have an opportunity to be engaged and involved as citizens, and that's a really precious thing, because, as you know, most people in the world, or certainly in world history, most people have not had that opportunity, and we are very, very privileged to be in a system like this. So that was a really long answer, but you can tell that I'm really passionate about it, and that's my message to your listeners, is to take this stuff very seriously, because freedom can be lost very, very quickly. And when your freedom is lost, your ability to make decisions on a whole wide range of issues is affected. So, hey, thanks for having me on your show, and let me know if you want to do a follow-up later.
Always. And thank you so much for reiterating this point. This is a point that I've been trying to hone on since day one of this show, and especially because we have a young audience, and young people generally are not super involved. I think this message is very important, and you're listening to this from an elected official. So listeners, you know what you need to do. Research candidates, learn about the issues, ask the important questions. It's all there. But Representative Morrison, that is unfortunately all the time that we do have right now, but thank you so much for joining us here today.
You're welcome. Take care.
Thank you.
And so that does it for us here today at the Sean S. Show. If you liked my commentary, then go ahead and follow the Sean S. Show on Twitter and Instagram for breaking news posts and updates about the show. And if you want to learn more about political stories, then check out my political news blog on the SeanSShow.com and go ahead and subscribe to it. Do us a favor and share this episode and all your other favorite episodes with your friends and family. It's the best way for this show to grow and get more people listening to it. Thanks again for all your support, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye.